family and internet strangers, Stephanie here with a new What's for Dinner video. All of the meals in this video are featuring things either that I needed to use up from my freezer or from my pantry. I am working my way through my freezer inventory. Look at all the things I've been able to cross off of that. So let's get right into some easy meals with all the ingredients that I need to get rid of. First up is some naan pizza. I had some naan in my freezer left over from when I had gotten it over the summer and made some recipes with it then. I had two then, and then I froze two. So this was to use up that. I wanted to use up some veggies from my fridge that I already had chopped up, but I like soft veggies on my pizza, so I decided to saute them for just a few minutes first, and to give them a little added flavor, I put some salt, pepper, and garlic powder on those with a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and just let these get a little bit soft so that they would be perfect to my liking once they went on the pizza and cooked on the pizza, because this really didn't need to be in the oven for too long. I used store-bought pizza sauce. You can also use homemade if you have homemade. I use homemade when it comes to spaghetti sauce. Pizza sauce, I'm okay with using a can for that, although sometimes I will use my spaghetti sauce in its place. So I started out with my sauce, then I put some cheese on it, and I'm going to put more cheese on top of my toppings afterwards. But I am adding my veggies, and then I'm also going to be adding some meat to this. I got pepperoni from the grocery store that I am going to be using in a few different recipes. But then I had some leftover capital that was in my freezer because I had read online that you could freeze it. You just would have to dry it off and take care of it that way when you take it out. And it smelled fine. It looked fine. It didn't taste great. Like, it wasn't rancid. It was not bad, but it was bad enough that I just picked it back off the pizza after I cooked it. So I do not recommend freezing your capital, even if the internet says you can do so. I would not recommend that. So I did not end up finishing up that capital, but now it's out of my freezer. So once I've got all the toppings I like on there, I add a little bit more cheese on top. I love a good cheesy pizza. I added some Parmesan on top of the mozzarella as well. And then I did this in the air fryer. You could bake it, but my air fryer is very convenient since it's already on my counter pretty much all the time anyways. I just did that until the cheese was all melty and my pepperoni was getting brown and the edges of my crust were brown, and then used a pizza cutter to cut this up. And then I like a little bit of extra sauce, so I did add a little bit of extra sauce to my plate when I served this. And once I was ready to eat this, I did make a salad as well. So for my salad, it's just romaine lettuce with some pre-chopped cucumbers and bell peppers and onions that I already had in the fridge, with a little bit of the Aldi version of the Olive Garden dressing on top. Next up are some beef patties with an onion gravy. This was using frozen hamburger patties. I've had this container of these forever, and I have used them several times, and I keep being able to use them for so many things. So I have done a different version of this on my channel before. This time I decided to use the Instant Pot for my burger patties instead of cooking them in the pan, and it was so much faster that way. It took about the same amount of time that it would take in the pan, but I was able to do my hamburger patties and my onions at the same time without switching pans or using multiple pans, and this just worked out really well. So I put the burger patties in the Instant Pot for 20 minutes with the salt, pepper, and garlic powder as the seasonings, and just some water in the bottom. I used the trivet for that. And then for my onions, I have shown how I make onions for so many different things, and this was not too different. The main difference here was that I added a cornstarch slurry to turn this into a gravy. So I sauteed my salt, pepper, onions, and garlic powder in a pan with butter until they were soft. Then I added a little bit of water, a little bit of a cornstarch slurry, and some of that better than beef bouillon base, and let that thicken up a little bit, and then added in my burger patties as soon as they were done. And once I did that, I put the onions over the top, I put a lid on this, and I let those flavors come together with this. Now, my original plan to go along with this, and part of the reason that I even made this is because I realized I had leftover mashed potatoes. And I thought, oh, this is always good with mashed potatoes. I'll kill two birds with one stone and use up my burger patties and my leftover mashed potatoes. Except disaster struck in the form of my mashed potatoes. When I took the lid off of them, they were no longer good, and I was so upset because I hate wasting mashed potatoes. But I think it might be due to the milk problems that I've been having lately with my milk going bad faster, because they were made using that milk that went bad after only a few days. So I think that might have had something to do with it. So I decided to pivot and I just mashed up some cauliflower. I had frozen cauliflower that I was going to have on the side anyways. Instead, I turned it into a mash because I do like something mashed when I do these burger patties with the onion gravy. I like to have something to have that gravy with. Now, I used heavy cream and some seasonings in this and just mashed them together, but I wanted it to be held together a little more, so I added some Swiss cheese that I had in the fridge as well. It wasn't perfect, but it tasted fine, and the cauliflower mash did the trick. A few weeks ago, I saw Megan over at Megan's Kitchen make some copycat potato olays from Taco John's. Now, that is something that I fell in love with on my road trips in 2020 through 2022. I love Taco John's. I didn't grow up with it, but it is one that now I will always stop when I see one when I am driving cross country. So if you haven't seen any of my road trip videos, those are always linked in the description box below. I hope you'll check them out if you haven't already. And maybe this year I might have another one. That's in the works for later on in 2023. The goal is to do another one of those trips. But in the meantime, I'll make some copycat Taco John's. I'll have the recipe that I used linked in the description box below, as well as Megan's channel, since that is where I got the inspiration to do this. So I am combining seasoned salt, paprika, cumin, and some cayenne pepper. I had an extra spice jar, so I simply used that to put all of these in because I knew it was going to make more than just the one serving that I plan on making at this time. And I shook it up and it blended together really nicely. I decided to do this alongside some bean quesadillas. These are almost like my take on a Taco Bell bean burrito, but in quesadilla form, because my tortillas that I have on hand are not really big enough for a burrito, but they're the perfect size for a quesadilla. So that is how I've been using them. For my beans, I took them out of the can, put them in a little pan here with some of that Olay seasoning. I thought that would go really well in this. And then I also added milk to thin those out a bit. And then to my flour tortilla, I add some of those beans in a nice layer and then top that off with some onions. I just had raw chopped up onions, and then I added some cheese on top of that. And if I had red sauce on hand, I would have also added that to make it really like a bean burrito in quesadilla form, but I didn't want to buy any of that when I knew I wasn't going to really be using it for anything else. So I decided just to skip that part. And then for my potatoes, I used shredded rounds from Kroger, threw them in the air fryer according to the package instructions. And then when they came out, I put the seasoning on them and then I put a lid on this and tossed them around, and they were so good. I was so happy to see those. So thank you, Megan, for that inspiration. I'm so happy that I saw that because that is not one that I would have thought to do a copycat of. If I hadn't seen someone else do it, it wouldn't have come to mind, even though I talk about Taco John's on a surprisingly regular basis for someone who did not grow up with it. Alongside this, I did have a salad. I just had some romaine lettuce, cheese, salsa, and sour cream, and I tossed that all together. And while I didn't have the red sauce to put in my quesadilla, I did have just a few packets left over of Taco Bell mild sauce, so I had that on the side to dip my quesadilla in, as well as some cheese that I got from Aldi. This was a green chili salsa con queso that was an Aldi find last week, and that was such a good meal. Next up, this one is very, very simple. I had crescent rolls to use up, and since I had just had pepperoni for those naan pizzas earlier in the week, I decided to do some little pepperoni crescent roll-ups. So I unrolled all of my crescents. I added 2 slices of pepperoni to each one, and then covered those in some mozzarella cheese, both on top of and underneath my pepperoni. I added some Italian seasoning and then rolled those all up. And then on top of it, I did add a sauce that you'll see here in a moment, but I will skip ahead to talking about how I cooked these. I simply cooked them in the air fryer. So once these were all rolled up and had the sauce on top, the air fryer worked really well. I was able to cook these for about 10 minutes at 375, and they were perfect. Just keep an eye on them because they may be done earlier than that. So with my little topping here, it's butter, Italian seasoning, and some seasoned salt and garlic powder. So that worked so well. It was so flavorful, and these reheated well. Served those with a Caesar salad, and then also had this for lunch the next day. So they definitely reheated well. They would work fine in a microwave. That's what I used, but you could also throw them back in the air fryer and it'd be even better. This next one, I am going to tell you straight up from the beginning, do not recommend. So I had found this spaghetti al limon, this lemon spaghetti from Aldi a few weeks ago, and I thought this would be a nice change in pasta from what I normally have, which is marinara sauce, or I'll make an Alfredo type sauce. So I thought lemon would be a nice change. I made it according to the package, and I tasted it, and I wasn't the biggest fan of the flavor, but I had already planned on doctoring it up, so I stuck with that plan. And then I added cooked chicken that I already had that I was using up from the freezer. I used some frozen broccoli, and then I doctored this up with some seasonings, a little bit of salt, pepper, some garlic powder, a little bit of onion powder. I added some heavy cream to this to try and get it a little bit creamier, and since I was adding so much that it wasn't necessarily made for being added to. And then I mixed it all together, and it was very lackluster. I didn't eat the leftovers. This wasn't great, so I do not recommend getting that Aldi pasta. They have some good ones. That one was not a fan. Let me know in the comments down below if you have tried this pasta and if you liked it or not. And finally, a night that I did not feel like cooking, but I also did not feel like takeout, and I'm trying to only get takeout now when I want something in particular. Since I did not, I decided just to get home and figure out what I had on hand that I could make quickly. And I decided I had some of those potatoes. I could do more potato olays. I had popcorn chicken, and then to add a vegetable, I decided to put broccoli with it, and then realized all of those are things that could be dipped in cheese, thus naming this dinner Things Dipped in Cheese. Thanks so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below. Next week, I'm going to have even more meals, cleaning out the freezer and pantry. I am really trying to get those cleared out pretty well before Lent starts, because I will be doing another Daniel fast this year. So once Lent starts, I'm going to be going right into that, and then I want to restock my freezer and kind of start from scratch. So more freezer meals coming up next week.